after talking about why recognition is so important, after hearing that from Sarah, let's dig into the how. So, as we saw in the icebreaker, everyone shared that recognition is something that we all respond to, and there definitely is some science behind that. So, welcome to session two, the science behind recognition and motivation. We're joined today by an incredible panel of experts who all bring a slightly different lens to the conversation. So we have Dr. Andrew Miki today. He's a registered psychologist, tech founder, and CEO. We also have Madison Hanscom. She's the director of people science and consulting at New Measures. And we also have Yannick Provencher, who's the IO psychology advisor at Bucketlist Rewards. So join me in the chat in welcoming these panelists. Super excited to hear what you have to say today. And I was mentioning before we officially started that this session had the highest amount of bookmarks, so no pressure, but I think folks are really excited about the session, and I'm excited to see what questions pop up that folks have for you as well. And yeah, just the three of you, I know you've all done some really incredible academic work over the course of your career. And I definitely love for all of you to share more about yourselves and the perspective that you're coming to this conversation about recognition. And so I think we decided that the best way to do that is for me to ask the first question, and y'all can slide into that in a really nice and easy way. So the first question for today, why do you think recognition is such a powerful driver of human behavior? What's going on beneath the surface? And Andrew, I'd love to pass this one to you first.
All right, thanks, Becca. Thanks, Becca. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just share a little bit about my background and what my perspective is on the science of recognition. And so, can everyone see this? Yeah. Okay, good. Um, so I started my career in private practice. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. I generally focused on people who are workers who are on a disability leave. And then I ended up working specifically with the BC Teachers Federation. It's a union of teachers in British Columbia. It's about 50,000 of them. And I ran groups for a while. And it just focused on a certain type of therapy called cognitive behavior therapy. Which is one of the most scientifically proven types of treatment for a lot of things like depression, anxiety, burnout, a lot of different issues like that. And then what we ended up doing, or what I ended up doing, is I ended up creating a program, a software program, and a company called Starling Minds that created digital mental health programs based on, I guess, what I did in private practice and what I did with a group. So what I was kind of figuring out at the time was trying to like, how can you scale um, I guess psychological mental health resources for people because there's so many problems with the current healthcare system around it. And then what I did about a year and a half ago is I left the company and I really started to pursue an area that I find has always been near and dear to my heart in terms of emotional intelligence. I learned about it in grad school and I always thought it was really interesting. And I think that that's where it really overlaps a lot with recognition. So that's what I want to bring to the table in terms of, I guess, some of my background. When I work with different people, I use this framework and I'll show you how it works for people who are well and unwell. I think it's really helpful for people to be self-aware of how much energy they have in their battery at any given time. I think it's helpful for them to know how mentally healthy or unhealthy they are. Usually, when people are more mentally healthy and their batteries are full, they're usually more self-confident and assertive and decisive for themselves. But what I end up seeing in my private practice, and then what we saw in the company as well, is that when people's batteries start running at a net loss, and it's usually over months to years, people fall down the mental health continuum and they experience a lot of these soft symptoms of anxiety, depression, burnout. And then obviously, as it goes down further, they experience more significant symptoms. And so, what cognitive behavior therapy does is it focuses on these areas over here, these specific skill sets. So, self-awareness, the ability to regulate your emotions, the ability to kind of manage your thoughts, set effective goals for yourself. These are some of the main areas that CBT focuses on. And what I've always found is that when people get really good at these skill sets, it then supports these higher level skill sets. And people generally then, the momentum of the battery being drained starts to reverse. It starts to stabilize and then it starts to move upwards. And then this is generally where I get people, I like around this part here is where I try to help people go back to work. Um, in the leadership training that I do with a lot of different organizations, I find that because people aren't ill, they're not starting off down here. Usually, this is when people are usually off work. So when I'm working with leaders, they're usually in this range here. Some of them are still at work and struggling with mental health issues, but they're still able to kind of keep up the work functioning. So that's generally the framework that I work with. And so what I thought I'd show, this is the last slide. What I thought I'd show is, the question that Becca asked is, why is recognition such a powerful driver of human behavior? And the science behind emotional intelligence is that there's five major components around it. And what I've found is that a lot of these mental fitness skills either overlap directly with these components. So then as people get more mentally fit, they become more emotionally intelligent. And where recognition fits in is like the self-awareness is a really interesting topic to me. It's a really broad term and it's often not really well defined. But generally, like there's a couple of aspects around self-awareness. One aspect is we call it like internal self-awareness. So this is like how well you understand yourself and how clearly you see yourself and understand yourself. And so if you view yourself as, say, a hardworking employee who's really dedicated and loyal to your organization and going above and beyond, that would be part of your internal self-awareness. And if somebody in the organization um, recognizes you, and if that recognition is consistent with what you view of yourself, so if somebody is recognizing you as that dedicated, loyal, hardworking employee, then because that matches your internal self-awareness, then usually what that does is it shows you, it helps you with external self-awareness. So what external self-awareness is like how well do you understand yourself in relation to what other people think? So if you think that you're a hardworking employee and other people think that as well, then you can see that there's a lot of overlap, right? And so then that would mean that you've got good internal self-awareness because you understand yourself, and then the way you see yourself is consistent with the way that other people see you. So when people give you recognition and they kind of validate the way that you see yourself, what that does, when you look at these other areas here, what it really does is it really hits on this area here. It can really be powerful in this area where it really helps motivate the employee a lot more so. But then you can also think of it in terms of like, well, what if somebody says something jarring, or what if somebody says something that isn't consistent with what you believe about yourself, right? Or isn't presented in maybe a genuine or authentic way, then it can equally have the opposite effect where it can also demotivate people, right? So I would say that the science of recognition is important because it can hit this part here on the plus, but then if it's not done properly, it can actually disillusion people. It can make people feel potentially less motivated. And if people feel less motivated, you could see how it could then potentially negatively impact, their battery, which would then make it more difficult for them to self-regulate, engage with people socially, and have empathy for other people. So a lot of these skill sets would go down, not necessarily if somebody isn't being recognized, but you could see how interrelated they are. And, so when it's done well, it has the power to enhance all these things. And when it's done poorly, or not at all, it has the power to degrade all of these areas. So that's how I would address that question, Becca. I can stop sharing my screen if I can
Thanks.
find that. There we
I
go.
love what you're saying about how it impacts us on like an individual level, and the things you said about how recognition can really validate how we see ourselves, or maybe improve our own self-perception. I think that's just so powerful, and it's just like such a good reminder for recognition when you think about it. Thanks again, Andrew. And Madison, I'd love to turn this question to you next. And I know you wanted to talk about it from like an organizational standpoint, so I'll let you take that away.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love how we have all these different perspectives here on the call. That's just such a treat. So I think before I start with who I am, I'll start with who we are at New Measures, where I work, because I think that's really helpful context for the type of data I have and the type of data I'm going to share. So We at New Measures, we help our clients with employee listening from start to finish. So we do surveys across the entire employee lifecycle, from recruitment to onboarding to engagement to 360s to exit surveys, right? And everything in between. We work with our clients to design these surveys, administer them, we build dashboards, we analyze data, we're presenting findings back to leadership, and then we coach them on what action to take. And a cool fact about us is that we are owned and operated entirely by women. So really unique thing I love to share with people. I love our all-women leadership team. So about me, I'm Madison. I'm a workplace psychologist. So how Andrew has his PhD in, the clinical counseling world, I am more of like a doctor of psychometrics and stats and workplace psychology and human behavior at work. So I lead the consulting team at New Measures, and I have my own clients. So I have some of my own clients, and I also support the consulting team with their own clients. Uh, as part of my role, I also manage our database and I write our trends report. So as an employee listening firm, you can imagine we collect a ton of data, and fortunately, we're able to consolidate it. We're able to make, draw conclusions. We're able to use it, and something that that might be really interesting to people on this call, because I hear that it really aligns with the profile of people on this call, is that we specialize in small businesses. So our average client size is right under 3,000 employees. We have clients that range in size from 12 employees to 30,000 employees, but really our sweet spot is, that small organization. And so what sets our research apart, what kind of sets our database apart, is that it's relatable. So I can imagine that y'all see those engagement trend reports that are written using data from major corporations, pulling in billions in revenue. And our reports are different because we are focusing on the everyday organization with modest resources. So we come in, we help our clients put together a listening strategy that makes sense for them so they can use data to make informed decisions about their business, about their people. And we also use that data we collect to give them good insights and benchmarks. So I'll be talking about this database today, and I think Andrew did such an amazing job of talking about, what's driving, or how recognition has this influence on everything else, and how does everything else influence recognition, and it really is this like psychological process and all those mechanisms. And something I thought that might be cool for me to talk about is, what do we see as the top drivers of recognition in an organization? So basically, we have this survey item that we put on almost all of our surveys because it's so important, is, I feel recognized when I do great work, right? So it's a really simple item. And then, of course, as you can imagine, I have this massive database of items where we can see what shares the strongest relationship with that. So there's an analysis that I can do to look at all of the variables in our database to see what topics share the strongest statistical relationship with recognition. For all the nerds out there, it's called relative weights analysis. It's a specialized case of regression analysis. And you're seeing the output here on this slide. When people report stellar recognition, when people say, I feel really recognized when I do excellent work, they also report these things. These are the key drivers. When you also feel encouraged to come up with new and better ways of doing things, when you also feel comfortable voicing your ideas, when you also feel confident you can achieve your career goals, you also feel like you can trust your manager and that your supervisor is giving you regular constructive feedback to improve your job performance. So these are all things that are also related to a strong recognition culture. And after everything Andrew just talked about, not a huge surprise with a lot of these things, right? Like those first two really are tapping into that kind of that concept of psychological safety, right? I can say what I need to say. I can experiment when I need to experiment. And then also, of course, it would not be a proper list if there weren't items on here about the manager, right? We know the manager relationship is so important when it comes to recognition. So this is the current list. This was using our database from the last 12 months. So it's, every time we do this, it's new data. We're always dropping off old data, adding new data. So this list always can change slightly depending on what people are feeling and what's going on. But here are the top drivers of recognition. And something I also want to mention, so as you can imagine, I focus a lot of time thinking about turnover and retention, right? So that's like such an important metric when we are working with executives and when we're trying to think about the ROI of what we're doing and what, what's powerful in that way. So you might be interested. So we ask all of the employees, well, most of the employees who we survey, do you plan to stay with your company in the next 12 months? Those who say yes, everything is going really well. These are the top 5 reasons that things are going well for them on the left side of the slide. I like to think about recognition's role in these things. You can see that the top reason why people plan to stay with their companies is the people, is the relationships. And recognition is a huge part in that. Recognition is how we can keep people sticky and we build those relationships and that belonging. And then on the right side, this is why people plan to leave their organization. So this is all the data that we compiled last year. Why do people plan on leaving their companies in 2024? The top reason, to no surprise, is compensation and benefits, followed by feeling like they can achieve their career goals with their employer. And then look at number 3. The number 3 reason why people are planning to leave their company is because they feel undervalued or they feel underappreciated. So really, every time you're having these conversations about organizational data, recognition is part of that story. So I know I kind of scratched the surface there, but connect with us on LinkedIn if you want the full trends report. It's about to come out in a couple of weeks for all of our hot off the press data. So find us on LinkedIn, and this is our website here.
Thank you so much, Madison. If anyone's interested in the report, just drop a yes in the comments. Curious to see who's looking into it, and yeah, we can get that. If it's okay, Madison, I can work with you to get that sent out afterwards. And yeah, it looks like a lot of people are interested. And I also did want to point out a comment that Shannon left for you in the chat, Madison. She said that she felt like knowing that you can do more education and reaching career goals is one area that they really want to focus on. And it sounds like number 3 and number 5 on your list for that one just really hit on it. So
I talk about that item all the time, right? And it's something that people, I'm shocked at how many organizations, people don't even know what their options are. What are my career paths? Or also, my manager doesn't even know what my career goals are, right? So a lot of it are those conversations, and a lot of those conversations can be used in tandem with recognition. So it all really is a really cohesive story.
that's great. All right, last but not least, Yannick,
Awesome.
I know you want to touch on this question from like Bucketlist standpoint with all the data that you work with. So without spoiling anything, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, great intro, both Andrew and Madison. I think you really introduced the topic of recognition really well here. In terms of me, I'm like Rebecca said, I'm IO psychology advisor and researcher at Bucketlist. So I'm in the same area of expertise as Madison, and I'm currently a PhD candidate in the same topic, so IO psychology. And we're just really love, IO psychologists to use statistics and to uncover, the truth about intervention and things like recognition and so on. And because I'm still, focused on academia as well, so I still do academic work, and I do, work at Bucketlist. Then I research a lot of different topics, and I'm still into it. And I've looked into a lot of things in terms of occupational health and safety. So I did research on workplace safety, safety culture, workplace incivility, burnout, stress, resilience. And now I've been, in the past year and a half, been working a lot on recognition. And the thing I love about recognition is simply that it's so easy to apply it in an organization and see the impact immediately. So part of my role at Bucketlist is really, at uncovering what's the impact of recognition, but also Bucketlist. And I have that quick slide that I want to share as well. Right here. So basically, what is the impact of recognition? And we all know from the research that it's really effective to boost employee engagement, to boost satisfaction, to reduce burnout and reduce turnover as well. And it also does a lot more, but I choose those 4 ones because these are key metrics that drive work performance. And when workers, perform better, you make more money for your organization and so on. And something we realized at Bucketlist is that, we looked at our customers and we look at the people that actually engage a lot with the platform, that participate in the recognition program. And what we've seen is that active user, people who log in weekly, people who recognize often, and just interact with the platform more than people who don't, they have better outcomes when it comes to these metrics. They receive more recognition by leaders. They receive more peer recognition as well. But not only that, they are more engaged. They are more satisfied. And their turnover intention, so them thinking about leaving the organization, is lower. So recognition is such a powerful tool, and it's quite easy to implement as well in an organization. And I think Andrew and Madison just explained really well why it's the case. But another thing I want to add as well is Andrew mentioned that your battery gets drained. And that's something that happens at work a lot, because work can be challenging. There's a lot of stuff happening. You have to deal with stress and different challenges that happens. And what recognition is at the end of the day, it's a way to fill that battery. So it acts as a resource. It acts like something you can build on to cope with all the stress and demands that you encounter in your work. So you feel like you're supported at work when people recognizes you, whether it's a manager or whether it's peers. It's just such a powerful tool. Like, I repeat myself on that. And that leads you to be more engaged. And the more that people in an organization are engaged, they can also use that energy then to feel better and just, have that circular kind of relationship where you're more engaged and you can use that as a resources again, and it leads just to better outcomes. So recognition really leads to a ripple effect of positive thing that leads to a better culture. So so I'm really excited to welcome what's going to come next in this webinar, and looking forward to your questions as well.
Thank you so much, Yannick. I know you have lots more interesting data and points to share as well, so I won't dig too deep with you right now. We'll save it for the questions that come after. Awesome. So we do have a few follow-up questions for this fireside portion after we've heard a little more about your perspectives around recognition. And so the first question that I want to ask after going through all of that, do you believe that there is a right way or a wrong way to recognize people? Because prior to this, we had a lot of pre-submitted questions around, is there a wrong way to do it? Is it when is it too much, when it might be demotivating? So just curious to hear what the panel's thoughts are.
Yeah, I can start with that one. I would say there's a more effective way to recognize individuals. So effective recognition has to be timely, right? So you want to recognize individuals quickly. You don't want to wait a couple of weeks or so on. Often, I remember getting recognized for something I did 3 months ago, and I kind of barely remember what it was about. And the problem with that, when it's not timely, what happens is you have time, so you might expect getting a recognition. If I work really hard on something, it's something I might expect from a good leader or a good or to be around my colleagues, is people will recognize me for the good work that I do. And if I don't get recognized quickly enough, then I might just internalize those negative emotion of not being recognized. So the negative impact of not being recognized happens, and then you recognize me 3 months later. Okay, I feel better at that stage, but there's still that issue that I internalize those negative emotions. So that's one of the problem when you don't recognize quickly enough. Another one would be you want to recognize frequently. So recognition that happens a lot and weekly and multiple times a month is going to lead people to recognize more in your organization. So that's how you also create that culture of recognition around. So like I said, it's like that domino effect. When someone starts recognizing and they see it, then it just keeps happening, and all those dominoes just keeps falling. And that helps really build a really positive culture. And another one is you want it to be fair as well. So you want recognition to be fair. You don't want to start recognizing just a specific individuals and so on, because that's going to create problems in your company culture as well. So these are, I think, a couple of things that are important. Another one that I personally like is you want the recognition to be personalized. People like to be recognized a different way, and we've seen it with the emojis at the end. Recognition make people feel a bit different. Some people are more shy than others. Some people are more extroverted. Some people like public recognition, whereas others prefer private, or people prefer personal note, or they just there's different way to recognize, and I think it's good. People should ask, their colleagues or their employees, how do you like to be recognized? Because that's going to be more meaningful to you. If you have a recognition that's personalized to you and that's not generic, then it's going to mean more to you than just random recognition.
Thank you, Yannick. We just have Eva and Meredith in a chat commenting as well that, it really sucks when everyone in your team gets recognized except for you. And so it's really important to find that balance as well. Andrew, Madison, was there anything you wanted to add on this piece? And I know Meredith had also made a comment about it's been a challenge to try and find ways to recognize people that feel genuine and authentic. So if there's something you want to say around those lines too, that would be great.
Yeah, I can piggyback up on that, Becca. Because I found it interesting what Madison was saying, right, in terms of some of the reasons why people stay and why some of the people leave organizations. And what I got is that out of the 5 reasons why people stay and they leave, 2 of them directly involve either their manager or people, like is why people stay, and then not feeling valued or the culture of the organization is why people leave, right? So I would say that like in order for recognition to be done well, like more of a right way, I guess, is that you need to have that solid relationship with whoever it is the person is giving the recognition. So, it's either coming from usually a colleague or, manager or something like that. So if you have a solid relationship and if you really feel like you really trust, that colleague or that manager, then when they recognize you, when it's done in, to Yannick's point, when it's done in a personalized way, when you put that together, then I think that that's the most powerful, right? That's where it's going to land the most. Um, and then if you think of it conversely, if you don't have that solid relationship, if you don't have that trust, and if it's done in either just like an inauthentic way, right, where it's like a kind of a cookie cutter kind of way of doing it, then it doesn't really hit the person as well. If anything, it might make them not like the person even more, that kind of way. So then I would say that that would be probably a less effective way. You kind of have to be able to assess the role or the type of relationship you have with the other person, and then figure out, the best way of recognizing them in the most authentic way possible. And that's usually what I would say is the best.
Hope that answers the question for you, Meredith. Madison, was there anything you wanted to add?
I thought that covered it nicely.
I love that. It's a really great segue actually into one of our other questions about trust and belonging. So Andrew, we can totally just piggyback off of that and wanted to talk a little bit more about the role of recognition that like what it plays in building psychological safety in an organization. And so Madison, I think this was an area of passion for you. So did you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, well, I think Andrew summed it up so nicely that it's like these are key mechanisms and the environment that you create, both for recognition to be possible and to land the way that it needs to, but also to create that environment to keep things sticky, right? For retention, to keep people there. And so psychological safety, I think that provides that environment for all of these things to happen. So I don't want to belabor it too much. Yeah. Anybody else have anything they wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, I can add on that, and I think that's great, Madison. And I think for me, psychological safety is all about, being able to be yourself in your organization and feel respected by being yourself and being able to voice your opinion and just being who you are. And the great thing about recognition, how it impacts that, is that if you get recognized, you're basically getting recognized for something that you did. You're recognized from the good work that you do. So you're being recognized for who you are. And that's why it's so powerful. And that's why it has such a big impact on organizations and employees, is because you just reinforce something that people value, So that's what I would say on that.
I guess what I would add, it kind of similar to what I was saying before, just in terms of the issue of trust, right? Trust with other people, trust with colleagues, especially trust with managers. I think that those are really key um, building blocks of psychological safety. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people here can think about times when you've had a really, great manager and you feel like your manager has your back. That's obviously when the recognition from that type of manager is probably going to land the best. Um, you know, I, when I started the company, we went through a couple of different CEOs. And one CEO I thought, had a really great relationship. I felt like he had my back and it went really well. Right. So then when he did recognize, any of the work that I did, then I felt like, it was authentic. It felt really good. I've also worked for different people who I didn't have that level of trust, right? And when you feel like, you've got that either poor leader or, weak leader or just, not personable or you just don't have that connection, you're not on the same page and whatever you try to do, you just don't get on that same page, then I feel like it really kind of fractures that trust. And then when people try to recognize you in that way, it usually doesn't land as well, right? Because usually you don't really trust what the person says anyways, right? So I think that trust is a really huge part of psychological safety. But I think to Madison and Yannick's comments as well, like it kind of has to hang together. Like the culture in the organization has to hang together with the leadership kind of culture, which then hangs together with the way that they try to interact with employees and the culture that the employees have at each like of the different levels. All of that's really important. And when it hangs together throughout the organization, that's usually when it's the most psychologically safe. And that's also when the recognition is going to land, I would say, probably the best.
Love that you were talking about trust. I love thinking about trust and this like the construct of like reciprocity, right? The norm of reciprocity. I like to remind leaders about this because it's a really powerful human norm. When people work hard and they pour themselves into a company, they want to feel something in return. And this
Mm.
is a way that leaders can reciprocate. Reciprocate. Hey, employees work hard for me. I can give them recognition, attention, connection, trust. And when I look at retention data from any organization, of course, it's that relationships piece, that trust, that reciprocity. So it's so impactful. And it really is a way that it helps to explain it in this abstract way, like why it's so important. Love that.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about tangible strategies that people in this chat today can, take away and noodle on. What principles should organizations apply when designing recognition programs that truly move the needle on engagement and retention?
Yeah, I can start with that one. And also I've noticed there's a few questions in the chat, Rebecca, so we might want to perhaps answer that after maybe this component. But what I would say is that you want to have a clear recognition program in place. So you want it to be structured. If you ask, your workforce to just recognize, you might not get the benefit because people won't really know how to do it. So that's why, like perhaps working with a company and building your own recognition program is a way to go because you're going to implement that structure or having a platform, like Bucketlist that allows people to log in and recognize people, give them an easy way, and also offer rewards and things like that. So having that structure is really, really, really important to be able to promote recognition throughout your organization. And the second thing I would say that's also really important is the leadership support. I think Andrew, you kind of mentioned that as well, is having the support from your leadership. Because if the leadership does not support the recognition program, it's going to be way harder to implement it. And I think a good way, I've seen one of the question, I think I was saying, what do we do if the leadership, it's not on board, it's a bit rough? I think, we have to show them how effective it can be. Often what the leadership want to see or higher executive is that the program that you're going to deliver in terms of recognition is going to bring money or it's going to drive up revenue for your organization. And the thing is that if you have an effective recognition program, you will have those benefits. It will happen because your employees, you will have a better culture. Your employees are going to be more satisfied. You will have less turnover. There will be more engagement. And at the end of the day, that's going to drive performance and revenue. And it's a win-win for every side. But it starts at the leadership level. If the leadership does not support it, it's going to be hard for employee also to be on board with the program.
Mhm. Andrew, Madison?
I'm happy to go next. Yeah, I think that like I think that every organization that I've worked with it's always, I find it really interesting because every organization has its own personality in a way, it has its own culture. And so then I think that, I don't think that there is one approach that's going to work for like every single organization. I think there's a lot of principles that can apply to a lot of different organizations. But sort of like what Yannick was saying, mentioning, somebody I think asked something about, what if the leadership is on board? Right. Well, I think it's very nuanced then, right? Like, is the leadership not on board because they're not self-aware of, what's going on within the organization, what other people are, experiencing, or do they care, right? Which is, another variable, and hopefully they do, but some of them might simply not care, right? Or they don't see it as being a high priority. So, like, I think having a really good sense as to what the lay of the land is in every organization and how you can kind of insert some of these, recognition variables within it is usually would be the best, but I wouldn't take, what other organizations have done and just like stamp it across every other one.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying about that because it really there is not a silver bullet, and there's different things with different cultures at work. And I think one thing, I think both of you just touched on it so nice broadly. I think just maybe one thing I would add about when people are designing recognition programs is that sometimes leadership can be overlooked. We know there's a lot of research that came out last year talking about burnout among leaders and managers, and they go unrecognized a lot. And so I meet with a lot of leaders when we do leadership 360 assessments, and sometimes I hear them just say, my job is so thankless. And these are executives, right? I'm talking like senior leadership, and they like, I grind really long hours and I have the weight of a lot on my shoulders, and there's a lot of invisible labor. And so I think sometimes too, just thinking about those people who are in those top roles too, and how we keep them recognized and feeling engaged, because it's really expensive and disruptive when we those people burn out too. It really is. It's like just thinking about all of those different aspects of the program.
No, I love that. Managers need recognition too. Yeah. One last question, and I think we can tie this one in with a lot of the comments and questions that folks are putting into the chat right now. But if an organization is struggling with low engagement with recognition or low engagement in general, where should they start when it comes to recognition? And so I think we can definitely touch on leaders, managers, as a lot of these comments are talking about here, as well as anything else that you wanted to bring up. I'll leave it up to whoever wants to start.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
Yannick, okay.
I think Madison's gonna be the best to answer that question, but I'm just gonna add quickly, what I want to say on that topic. And it goes back basically to what Madison does here, is that the first thing before implementing a recognition program, you want to identify what the problems are. And recognition is a really good solution for a lot of different things. But you want to know what it is, right? What's the issue that's happening? And a good way to figure out what's the issues in your organization is having a great employee listening program. And I'll let Madison, I think, dive into that because I think she's the expert on it.
Yeah, and that's the way that you're able to use recognition to be effective, is using it in conjunction with your employee listening program, your strategic listening. And I love to think about recognition as an intervention. And it can look so different depending on why your engagement is low. So let's say you run your engagement survey, engagement is low, you do your key driver analysis, and then you can see those things that are explaining why your engagement is low. And maybe it's a myriad of things, and recognition is not on that list, right? But those things on the list typically, almost always, can be directly influenced by recognition. So then you understand all of those factors that are driving engagement and use recognition as a tool to reinforce or drive or improve those factors. So, and this is something, oh gosh, I don't know, it was Andrew, somebody mentioned this earlier, but recognition is an awesome intervention for a lot of reasons, but it's free to a manager. So, a lot of time we talk about, oh, we don't have the budget, we don't have this, we don't have that. But, recognition, there's a lot of research on non-monetary recognition. Um, it works, right? People need to hear that they're doing a good job. They need the pat on the back. They can't hear it enough. Managers are too busy to give it. And so I've had clients use non-monetary recognition as a post-survey intervention to boost engagement, and shape the culture in a direction that they really wanted to move. One that comes to mind is an investment firm. They really wanted to improve their cross-department communication and also the recognition. So they started recognizing the behaviors, the cross-functional communication behaviors that they needed to see. So when people were doing the right things and they were keeping the other department in the loop and they were scheduling the sales handback meeting or whatever it is, they would publicly recognize it. So that positive reinforcement is getting more of those cross-functional communication behaviors, but then it also moved the needle on recognition because people are like, oh, my work is finally recognized, right? So you end up making that positive impact. And so that's why I love it as an intervention, and it can be really energizing for people because you can see the impact immediately. It's not something, a lot of these other org changes take forever to make an impact, but just a few weeks later, people feel the impact of recognition. So I think, yeah, so I think that's kind of like my big picture answer is like what Yannick was saying. In your employee listening, figure out what the issues are, what are the drivers, what do you want to work on, and then how can you use recognition as a lever to accomplish your goals.
Love that. People are just posting little notes in the chat here about giving, notes to people, to managers to support them, taking different approaches, filling out a survey. Madison, I see you looking at them as well. Was there one you wanted to highlight?
Gosh. Um,
Well, I like
Oh,
the one about the snacks, it shows how easy it is to personalize recognition. You just have to pay attention to the little things. And once you do, like, you'll be surprised how big of an impact it can have on people. It doesn't take long. Like Madison said, it's free to do it, for managers as well and for colleagues. You just have to spend a few seconds in your day to just figure that out and do it.
yeah. I resonate with like the I don't have time thing because everything just piles up and you're just like, oh, I gotta get through my day. But then I started kind of blocking time for myself on like Fridays, just like it's like a to-do item, like spend 15 minutes, give a couple shout outs this week for people who've like really made a difference to my work week and took something off my plate, took the time to check in and say, how you doing? Everything good? Anything I can help with? So those little things.
it's really cool. Our team does we're a small firm, so we have an all hands meeting every week, and we do a shout out segment where we, going into the week, shouting those people out, reflecting what's going really well. It really does. It makes such a huge impact. I love that example, Becca.
Thank you. Oh, Stephanie has a good one too. Reaching out to someone when they have had a loss has an impact. When you see a actual sympathy card, it can be very impactful to be seen. Treating people with kindness goes a long way. And a couple of questions in. Okay, great. I see a lot of people posting questions. If you could port that over to the Q&A, I think we will have a few moments at the end to answer Q&A. So I'll let y'all move your great questions into Q&A and we can start the wrap up portion and then leave, I'm hoping at least like 5 minutes for questions.